Hi, everyone. I'm Megan Dabney with Denise Holba, and we're very happy to have Lesa Paddack here from Insource. She's an assistant director and parent liaison to the Indiana Department of Education. Welcome, Lesa.
Hello.
Thank you so much. Hi, Megan. Hi, Denise. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Can you explain what Insource does and how they can be a resource to special needs families?
I would absolutely love to. So Insource is the Parent Training and Information Center for Indiana. So we help families understand about their rights, roles, and responsibilities. Every state must have at least one PTI, Parent Training and Information Center, and we have been Indiana's the whole time. We receive state and federal funds to help families learn the special education process. It can be very daunting and confusing to walk that journey. So at Insource, all of us either have children, adult children, siblings, we have a family connection with an individual who has some type of a special healthcare need or concern. And so we have been on both sides of the table. We particularly specialize in helping families with the special education process. In Indiana, we are very fortunate to have several family organizations that collaborate together, but Insource focuses on special education. We do have special education liaisons all across the state. I cover the state as the Insource parent liaison to the Department of Education. And I am actually on the special education team at the Department of Education, which makes our organization unique in the whole country, as far as we can tell.
Wow.
So we are very appreciative to the special education department for bringing parent voice to the table. And I like to say part of what we try to work toward as a parent organization is not just having a seat at the table, but a meaningful voice. And that is different and that is important. So across the state, we have special education liaisons. And so if anyone goes to our website, they can click on their district and find out what special education liaison assists them. I assist through the state. And basically, we are trying to help families understand that process, understand how it works, and understand what to do if they do not agree. So our services are free. We receive state and federal funds to assist families and to honestly give technical assistance in general. So we can give some technical assistance to the school, community stakeholders, such as your organization, and parents. And we love to do that because we feel that providing education is empowering. And many times, this is a daunting, kind of confusing process to understand because parents don't typically live in it. So we want them to understand what their choices are, because you cannot make a good informed choice for your family or yourself if you are the individual if you do not know all of the choices. Even if you're perhaps not thrilled with them, you have to know what those choices are to be able to move forward to access a FAPE, a free and appropriate public education for your child or yourself.
Wow. At what point should someone look into getting an education liaison? Is there a purpose? If there isn't really a problem, when do you recommend they start collaborating with Insource?
That is a great question, Denise. So there's a couple of different junctures. So obviously, a lot of what we do is on the phone, but we are one of the only parent training and information centers left in the country that still attend case conferences with families.
Yeah.
Now, that does not mean that we have the staffing or ability, or even that the parent has the need to have us attend a case conference with them. We do actually have our own process of helping the family walk through information. We front load information to a family. So just because we're not sitting beside them doesn't mean we haven't prepared them. And even when you go to our website and you email in to us, you will automatically be sent some information so you can start looking at that before you ever speak to your liaison. So you might call your special education liaison if you just have general questions. That's totally fine. I want to know how to get an evaluation for my child. Or what is a manifestation determination meeting? I don't know what that means. It's coming up and it sounds really important and kind of scary. What are the eligibility categories under Article 7, which is Indiana special ed law, because they're going to evaluate my child. So that's one area. You might call just for some general information and questions. We're happy to help. A family typically calls, though, when they have a problem. So there's something specific that's occurred. They have a specific concern. Perhaps there's been a specific incident. We do get a lot of calls about discipline. Not a surprise, right? Because that's on the forefront many times with our kids who have differing abilities, a lot of sensory issues. Then there might be some behaviors, and there may be some suspensions or even expulsions. And it's really important to know what Article 7 says about that. And we are not attorneys, so what we do is we're going to send out a copy of Navigating the Course, which is a family-friendly version of Article 7. Have the family understand the process of how that meeting works. What is a manifest? What are the 2 questions they're going to ask? What can you do if you disagree? So we're going to walk through that scenario with them. And so maybe they did call and ask a question such as, my child has an IEP. Can they suspend them? I didn't think they could. Well, the answer to that is yes. But there are,
I think a lot of people in this group know the answer to that.
Yeah, absolutely. So typically it's when there's a problem. Now, one thing we also try to do is, because we don't know if that family will need us again, or honestly have time to reach out to us again, because we know sometimes life is overwhelming. So we try to make sure that we also send some basic resource. And that's where Navigating the Course comes in, or even our document that we did with the Indiana IEP Resource Center about a parent's guide to the IEP. So that document basically walks you through some of the discussion points on Indiana IEP. It's wonderful. So that you can get an idea of, well, maybe what should be discussed during the extended school year session. We don't discuss that. So we try to provide ongoing resources. But first, when you talk to us and you have a problem, we're going to try to deal with that problem, but then help you understand that, for instance, we do have special education training on our website. So when you're in the middle of this, or maybe when it's past, you can even go through a whole Article 7 training that we provide free of charge. You can do in the comfort of your home. And then you will understand that process. And then additionally, we do attend at conferences. Right now, a lot of them are virtual because a lot of times parents aren't going in either, but we do attend case conferences when that is needed. But a lot of times we can front load and support a parent, and they go in, and then a lot of times we'll say, okay, here's all the information about X, Y, and Z. When you go to that meeting, know that you have some rights. You can disagree. You can propose. We help them understand that school's going to offer what they think is a free and appropriate public education. And if you disagree with that offering, you have rights under Article 7 and under IDEA. And then come back to us if that meeting doesn't go well. And then that's a good time for us to look at going to that meeting.
Okay, that makes sense. How much advance notice should you give an advocate to prepare for attending a meeting with you?
Okay, well, that's a good question. And one thing, because this is a great platform, I want to make sure that families understand, because years and years ago, we did rather use the term advocate. So we have moved very far away from that, in that there is a difference in what we do and what a paid advocate does. When you pay someone, they are going in for a particular outcome. And sometimes they are, and sometimes they're not interested in collaborative discussion. We are there because we know that we can help a family with the hard conversations, okay? But we're not a paid advocate. So we want families to understand that we're there to help empower them and educate them. And sometimes we can help remove some of the emotionalism in the situation. As school is discussing, and they've had difficulties, and family has had difficulties, because we are particularly focused on that child and that free and appropriate public education. And to be honest, that is actually between parent and public agency rep, what they make a decision as a free and appropriate public education. So when you look at how far ahead should you contact one of our special education liaisons, you don't always have a lot of time, but hopefully 2 weeks. If you're planning, you know that you would like to have someone attend. So the very first thing is to call. Many times our staff will walk the parent through, like we said, prepare them, and then say, okay, I've now prepared you, go to the meeting. If it doesn't go well, then I'll look at attending. Sometimes some things can be solved actually ahead of the conference. Parent might give consent for one of our staff to speak to the school. And then when we do that, what we're saying is, we're not representing the parent, but the parent has brought about these 5 concerns. Could you share with us what the school's concerns are? Then we go back to the parent and we try to really have a meaningful conversation of, for instance, yes, school can suspend your child. Here's the citation in Article 7 so that you can understand this, but they can only do this for, and then we go through the process. So we are actually what I like to call the pivot to the process. You can propose this, family, you can agree or disagree or propose something else. So when we attend a meeting, it is very good for us to have enough time. We're not going to just show up at a meeting. We want, because we just don't feel that's appropriate. So we want to make sure that we've gone through. We know that the parent honestly is invested in this process. We want them to understand what our scope and our role is, because we don't want families to have an expectation that's not realistic. We are there for the hard conversations. If we hear something in a conversation that's concerning, we're going to bring that to light. But we are not adversarial in nature. We don't feel that benefits the child, that benefits the school or the family. Yeah. So we are there for that hard conversation, but we are going to try to be polite, considerate, as collaborative as possible. That does not mean that we won't have hard conversations. We will just work to try to structure those conversations so that parent understands what's being said and then can make an informed choice. And perhaps we can give some assistance in different ideas or some type of support of knowledge for the whole case conference committee, so that that public agency rep and that family can make a decision, or family decides they're going to move on in the dispute process.
What kinds of issues can a liaison assist a family with?
That's another great question. In general, we typically focus on 504 plans and special education. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't answer some general education questions, because we do. And many times a parent doesn't know that something actually is a special education issue, because that's not their experience, right? Because they don't live and breathe it. So a special education liaison can help with just a variety of different issues. We, at the point that we feel that we can't give assistance, then we do tell a family, since we're not an attorney, I can't answer that question, or you may want to consider legal counsel, or additionally, then we might send someone on to Indiana Disability Legal Services or Indiana Disability Rights to, work with an attorney, since we're not attorneys and we want to make sure that we don't represent ourselves as that. So, excuse me. Some of the common issues, though, that we get, we do help families discuss their IEP. Okay, so they may send that. Now, that does not mean we're there to pick that IEP apart. That's not our role. But we're there to look at that, and we can help come up and form some concerns or questions for that family to discuss. So, Mrs. Smith, I hear your concern that your child continues to get suspended. I have a concern that there's not a behavior plan written in the IEP. Right. Those are the type of things, because, in general, we weren't sitting at the table when that was written, right?
Yeah, right.
We're not teachers, we're not parent. but we can help a family with kind of structuring their talking points. And then anything that we see that really rises to the level that it might be impeding that child being successful for school. Then it comes back to the conference to make a decision. And those are some of the common things. So perhaps we have a child being served under emotional disability, but there's not been a behavior assessment, behavior plan, and behavior goals. Those are some of the things. Now, again, we're not there to say absolutely what should be in that IEP because we don't know that child.
Right.
But those are some of the things that we talk about. So, Mrs. Smith, you discussed transportation. Well, transportation is not listed in your IEP as a related service.
Right.
So we really work to try to help that family with understanding how to structure their concerns. And then if there are some things that rise to our level of concern, we're going to share those. But to be honest, sometimes a parent doesn't have concern about the things that we bring forward. Nope, I'm okay with that. I am okay that they're going to reduce day.
Mm-hmm.
But we're not parent. Our goal is to say, Ms. Smith, do you understand the school's proposal is to move your child to homebound, which is the most restrictive environment? Do you understand what that would mean? We're there again as that pivot to the process. If Mrs. Smith says that's absolutely what I want, once we have walked her through that true understanding, perhaps shown in Article 7 or navigating the course, that is between school and public agency rep. And, we might also have that discussion. School, my concern is what have you walked through before you've gone to homebound? So we are going to ensure that we have a discussion at that case conference about this. It's going to be meaningful. It's going to be intentional. But at the end, it is between a public agency rep and school.
Right. Yeah.
So you mentioned like having choices. How can a family know when they should be getting more services or have other options available to them?
That is also an excellent question. So I really encourage families to read the procedural safeguards. And I understand it can be daunting, but it is important. And they have every right to ask someone to explain them. Okay, that is really important because not everyone is comfortable with reading. They can also be provided in other languages, but it is important for them to understand that they know that they have rights. So if there's a procedural violation they're concerned about, they have a right to file a complaint with the Department of Special Education. Okay, they have a right to ask for mediation, which is where the state gives a mediator and the two parties come together and mediate. That is voluntary. They have a right to go to due process, which is a legal proceeding. And then a due process hearing officer makes a decision. Additionally, in Indiana, we do have a wonderful option. Now, it is not spelled out in Article 7, but it's called a facilitated IEP meeting through the Indiana IEP Resource Center. And that's where a facilitator comes in. And particularly those are done if someone's voice feels like they're not being heard. And typically it's a parent because when the facilitator from the Indiana IEP Resource Center comes in, then they are going to ensure that the case conference proceeds in the steps that they're supposed to. Because for it to be a compliant case conference, you are supposed to go over, present levels and strengths, concerns, parent concerns, before you go to placement, so to speak. We always, many times, want to look at where's my child going to be placed. So in Indiana, we have that wonderful option that is additional. So that is one thing. Calling one of our staff, we can help walk through. But a few things that you might want to look at in particular, when a child has an IEP, the reason that they have it is not just that they have a disability, okay? So they can have a disability and not have an IEP. But if they have a disability, then it has to adversely impact their education, either behaviorally or, which would be like functionally or academically or both. So in order to have an IEP, you have to have goals. So that means that those goals are written to work to close a gap. There's a skill deficit, okay?
Yeah.
Whether it be in behavior, it be in academics, it be in both. So when you do not see progress in those goals, that's a red flag. So it doesn't mean that your child's always going to meet their goals right away. And a goal, a case conference, you can have a case conference, call one at any time you want, but usually, those goals are for a year. So when you have that annual, where do we want to see your child in a year? And parents are a vital part of that under IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And they are actually a required participant in that. So when you look at what services should my child be getting, or how do I know if I need more? If your child is not progressing on the goals, that is a red flag. So to come back to the table to say, are these goals appropriate? Okay. Or does it have to do with the specially designed instruction? What school is doing differently for my child than a child who doesn't have an IEP? So the hope with all goals is that you would close that gap. Now, by nature of disability, sometimes that gap is not going to totally close. Okay. But we want to work toward closing that gap as much as we can and supporting the student and increasing skill set, because that's what a goal really is about. How do we help support a student to increase a skill set, whether that's communication, that's interaction, that's reading, that's level, that's math, computation. We know that that child has some type of a skill that we think they need to work on to access their FAPE, their free and appropriate public education. So looking at progress in goals is one really good spot that you can take a look at. Additionally, when you talk about behavior, I would also say if a student behavior is so impeding that things are not going well, they're not attending school, they're not able to access their FAPE, they're a continual struggle, because we know everyone's going to have bad days. We know that incidents are going to happen. We all have, good and bad days. But if a family continues to see that things are not working, it's time to call another case conference. Maybe we add goals, change goals. Maybe it's time to look at, an additional evaluation of some type, maybe different eligibility. Maybe we look at a new functional behavior assessment. Maybe we even look at some outside supports. But in general, when you do not see progress, that's one of the biggest indicators to have a conversation about, I'm not pleased with the trajectory that I'm seeing.
Yeah. Do you, this is not part of the questions,
Okay.
but it just sparked a question.
Sure.
You say you're at school seeing, and I've seen IEPs written through my job and stuff. Say you see making progress, and then at home, there's like not at all. Is there any, and you're like, well, how can this be? Assuming that, I go on the assumption that families do, it's not like they're worse than schools, I guess. I don't know how to say it nicely or anything like that. And then you're like, well, why is this happening so much at home? But they're saying at school, it's not a problem at all, or they're making progress. Is there any recourse when you see behaviors at home versus at school? And you're just questioning, how can this be, or no?
Well, that IEP is written for educational setting.
Right.
But additionally, there are some things that can occur. Perhaps the difference is a more structured or differently structured setting with peers. Peers can play a large part. Structure can play a large part. But some very easy type of options could be, let's just say, for example, that student is receiving speech services or behavior services, and at school they have a very structured chart or schedule. you know, that family at the case conference could say, would it be possible to get a copy of that or some kind of structure like that made, so that we could use it at home? You know, typically they will at least work with you in that. They might give you a copy of it, or additionally, if the child is receiving outside private services and there's a consent, the outside, let's say outside speech therapist and the school speech therapist can talk, and then that outside speech therapist could perhaps make some supports for that child, because consistency is extremely important. And sometimes that can be a real help of using the same verbiage, setting up the same type of a program, though it's different at home. But sometimes even things like first we'll do this and then we'll do that, and they use that in the school. Well, maybe that's not something parent has thought of, and someone can help with a schedule that is a first then, and they can implement that at home, because typically it is typically very helpful to use some of the same verbiage, some of the same approach, maybe even some of the same rewards if things are going well at school. Secondarily, you can ask to see some data. Okay, so particularly your interests probably are for kids with significant behaviors. So let's take a look at what behaviors you're collecting data on. And this is a good opportunity to say that if a child is in a classroom for emotional support, that does not mean they cannot have their own individual behavior plan. Many times there's a classroom one, but that doesn't fit everyone. It's an individual education program. Okay, so they can have their own behavior plan. So a parent can say, I'd like to see, let's make sure that you're collecting the data that I'm interested in seeing for these goals. Could we do that? Let's have a meaningful, intentional conversation. And what does that look like? So particularly when there are significant concerns, whether they be about behavior or academics, then understanding what data points are being collected, how they're being collected, because that's also listed in the goals. Is it narrative? Is it scatter plot? What is it? So that parent can understand, because sometimes they don't even agree with the data. So maybe when they come to have a discussion and they look at the data and they're like, please explain to me how you feel this data translates to a good outcome. I'm seeing more, just example, I'm looking at your data and I'm seeing 23 behaviors here. The behavior is categorized as A, B, and C. So learning to be educated and informed about data collection is helpful. It doesn't mean that they always have to feel like they're an expert at it, but just understanding, okay, with these goals or with this behavior program, what are you collecting data on? And additionally, what is a behavior in your classroom? So for this teacher, a behavior might be speaking out without raising your hand. In another classroom, that's not even counted. So it's really important to understand not only what the end goal is, so to speak, but how the data points are being collected along the way. When are they being collected with fidelity? So are they actually being collected every day? And what is the criteria? So does it look the same to have a behavior in everybody's classroom? Or is, science, it's okay to speak out, and in English it's not, because that's confusing for kids. And maybe we're getting all this negative data in English, and no one's clearly said to this child, in science, we have a more open discussion format. So we're going to put a little something on your desk to remind you in English that we raise our hand. So sometimes breaking down that data and really looking at the data that's being collected for the goals, and then the behavior data. What is it? What is a behavior? What does that, because I've even had situations where school have said, well, we don't consider it an aggressive behavior if a child just smacks at us but doesn't make contact. And a parent may say, I do. I want that measured. So truly getting down and saying, okay, I need to know what data is collected. Additionally, that sparks good intentional conversations.
Mhm.
What is an incident at our school? What do I consider an incident as a parent? Maybe I don't consider a slap that doesn't make contact. Then you need to have some discussion. A
Mhm.
school does, perhaps,
Yeah.
and those are important points, because if you're seeing 35 incidents and you're like, what's going on? Well, perhaps school is saying, well, we consider an incident as any type of a slap, even if it doesn't make contact. So it's really important to understand what categorizes this behavior, okay, or what categorizes passing, what categorizes what the concern is, and what data is being collected, and is it being collected with fidelity? If it's supposed to be collected once a week, could I see some of that information? Now, we know we don't want to be particularly burdensome, but
Yeah.
we have a right to be able to have a meaningful discussion, and that often takes data.
Yeah.
So, in 2 weeks, I'd love to see the data that you've collected for the last month.
Yeah.
So that we can have a discussion, because just like school staff don't have tons of extra time, neither do parents. So we
Right.
have meaningful meetings about this. But sometimes that is part of the hard conversation that we can have at that table. School, you are looking at Dominic having a reduced day. Could you please share with us the data and what you have done in that continuum of service and support before you've went through moving him to half a day?
Yeah.
So those are some of those meaningful conversations about progress, about data, and some of what we help families with. But in one of the biggest things we want families to understand is we want them to understand how to learn those self-advocacy tools.
Wow.
And I kind of want to jump in and just mention, like, in my experience with IEPs, like, I've been very fortunate to have like really great teachers, and we kind of collaborate
Beautiful.
at
Mhm.
the meetings and compare notes a little bit.
Mhm.
Like, for example, my son, he's not the most motivated guy, and they had mentioned something about, like, he'll open his own milk carton, and you know how hard those are,
Right,
like,
yeah,
even,
they are.
and I'm like, he opens his own milk carton. Like, I'm at home opening everything for him. And we can kind of compare notes. So, like, now
Yes.
I know, like, when he brings me something to open, like, I don't think so, dude. You can open that milk carton. And like, it's the same way with school. If I
Yes.
like, if I'm able to get him to do something at home, I can share with them, and then we are on the same page, kind of thing.
You're absolutely right. And one thing that I talk to parents about, because sometimes we do get that call, well, at home, our child is doing this. And sometimes it is a child with some significant support level needs.
Mhm.
And maybe they're not showing some of those skills at school. Okay. So I say, is there an opportunity, to videotape that skill at home, in that respectful manner, because maybe that child isn't reading at school, but maybe when you sit down at home and give them a little space, they are reading. So of course, there's that discussion about videotaping your family and all that. That's separate. But if you get that opportunity, you're absolutely right, because then you don't open the milk carton anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you don't have any relationship, it's really hard to have meaningful conversations. And I think that is a large part of how we try to assist, because we feel like, you and your school, short of moving, or withdrawing, you're going to be with your school for X amount of years.
Yes.
We are
Yeah.
not a gotcha organization. We are there as a collaborative mind and partner. And we happen to have pretty extensive knowledge of Article 7, but we're
Yeah.
not an attorney. So when you need an attorney, you take another step, but we can have some of those meaningful, intentional, and sometimes hard conversations, because our staff has lots of experience. And one of the other things we do is we have seen and we collaborate together to get lots of different ideas. So sometimes what our staff does for a parent or a school or at a case conference is really throw out ideas. Have you considered X, Y, and Z? It was used at another school very successfully. Have you considered that? Now that is between a parent and a school to case conference to make that decision. But many times that has been really helpful to be able to throw out something, because our staff, we see thousands of IEPs, we attend
Yeah.
hundreds of meetings. So sometimes just that, have you considered that? Or, sometime maybe you want to look at just trialing this. Could we do 6 weeks of this and collect data? So we want to try to be an assistance to that case conference to focus on that child's free and appropriate public education, which is what both sides are trying to do. But sometimes some of those emotions get in the way, and we are there to try to assist with that collaborative discussion.
So our group is for people who have loved ones with higher needs and behavioral issues. What accommodations can be made at school for more them to be more successful for those with those type of issues?
Again, your questions have just been absolutely wonderful, and I have really appreciated those. So one of the first things, because I'll hone in and focus a little more on students who have a high level of need for behavioral supports. So you want to work with your school team to make sure that there has been a good discussion about what the behaviors are. Now, normally what you would start with is an FBA, that functional behavior assessment. And typically that involves some observations. Now, it can be done on record review and discussions, but I suggest that schools have a meaningful conversation about, do we need more live data? Do we need observations? So when we look at doing just your general functional behavior assessment, then what you typically would have is someone doing that assessment, and we hope in different environments. So one of the things that we or I particularly have a conversation about is, is there a class or with a teacher that this student is particularly successful and one they're not? Or maybe a setting, they're really struggling at lunch when it's unstructured, but they do very well in the English class where it's very structured. So when we have that intentional conversation about what that FBA will look like, we encourage some real intentionality to those visits. Hopefully that whoever's doing that, and that could be a variety of different people, because it's not laid out in Article 7 who has to be the one, but I hope that they do it in an environment over a couple of different environments, and maybe even a few different days, because once again, you have a good, bad, or a bad day, but then that FBA should be coming up with some discussion about what the behaviors are, what the intensity is, and what the function of the behavior is. We are not behavior experts, nor do we pretend to be at all. So we leave those things, just like the goal writing. We can help contribute and get discussion going, but that's not our forte. So, but typically in an FBA, you will see the behaviors and the function of the behaviors. So it's really important to collaborate and make sure that, yeah, I see that, I agree with that, or I really have a concern that, just for instance, you feel this behavior is being particularly manipulative, and that's not how I see it. I see it as X, Y. So then you would write that behavior plan, and keep in mind that that behavior plan is to be followed, just like every part in the IEP. And additionally, for students who have significant behaviors, you want to step through and think about what the safety plan is. Okay, when would police be called? When would parents be called? Because if it is in there that a parent is called, then that is not considered a day of suspension. And sometimes parents want that. They want to do it that way. Other times they don't. And so walking through what that behavior plan is super important, and making sure it's proactive, it's positive. The best thing that can happen for a student with significant behaviors is to keep them out of a meltdown, right? And at the same time, the goals are going to be written to try to close that skill gap that might cause some of those meltdowns, right? So maybe it's communication, maybe it's frustration level. So how do we help this child recognize and self-modulate their frustration level to avoid the meltdown? So additionally, you can also, what kind of accommodations really smooth and out the day, right? So maybe when we're looking at self-modulation, maybe that means a check-in in the morning with whatever system is the kiddo's choice. So let's not make color coding if they hate color coding. you know, that always, let's have the child buy into. So maybe they want to do superheroes or may whatever. So sometimes it's checking in the beginning of the day to say, on a scale from 1 to 5, I'm a 2. I am calm and cool, or I'm a 5. Or maybe they do like the color scheme. I'm a red. Well, then in that behavior plan, you know some things to help reduce the chance that when they walk into the classroom, there's going to be an issue.
Right.
Maybe that means 5 minutes in the sensory box. Maybe that means a walk around the school. But additionally, with behavior, part of what we're working toward is staying in school, right? That's one of the biggest issues. We're also helping families and school understand you don't have to earn your way back into education. We're supposed to be writing a plan that helps keep us in school as much as possible. Now, sometimes there's decisions, you know what, right now this is going on. It's okay to go reduce day. But in general, kids are supposed to be at school. That's the, but they're also supposed to be at school learning, actively engaged, and we hope reasonably happy, right? Mm-hmm. So when you look at those, so maybe it's a color code system or some kind of self-modulation. Maybe it's beginning of the day, end of the day. Maybe it is a sensory room. Maybe it is ensuring the teacher of record does exactly what needs to happen to ensure that, for instance, teachers know this is a child who has PTSD and you can't walk up behind them and touch them on the shoulder. Mm-hmm. So making sure that behavior plan is followed, that everyone who comes in contact, lunch person, bus driver, knows what should be occurring to follow that plan. Because at a manifestation determination, the 2 questions that are asked is, you know, did this incident have a substantial relationship to the disability, or was it part of the school not following the IEP? Well, that's part of why an IEP has to be clearly spelled out as much as possible. And so that in that behavior plan, everyone knows what should occur. If this child puts a red card on their desk, that teacher needs to know what that means. And so does that student. Student knows if I put that red card, I'm not to wander around the school, I'm to go to one of 2 places. And teacher knows that student's going to get up and be at one of those 2 places. So there is actual responsibility on both sides, but you're working toward, you know, self-regulation. You're working toward self-advocacy additionally. Excuse me. Because you know when the bus stops coming, this young adult's going to be 18 or 22. And they won't have an IEP in the adult world. Right. Still looking toward that end result of increased communication, self-modulation, being able to handle the stresses of real life. So when you look at services and accommodations, those are some of the things. And additionally, don't be afraid to bring in related service providers such as OT. Maybe part of the issue is sensory. So ask for an OT eval for sensory issues. So you might find that 5 minutes in the sensory, having the sensory items makes the morning better. Then you have another 5 minutes at lunch and another 5 minutes before the bus, because on the bus, it's loud, it's crowded, you know, and it's, those buses can be a lot for anybody to ride. So sometimes it's something very simple like that. Other times it's clear communication to that student of what's expected with the supports. Okay, you know, we've talked about, here's your break card. That break card is for 5 minutes, and in 2 minutes, I'm going to remind you that you have 2 more minutes. So the idea is you want that student to gain independence and self-advocacy skills, but the school has to follow that plan for everyone to know what it is. And then sometimes you hope that maybe then family and school will figure out a good way to help do some of those same activities at home to support family.
I mean, I've mentioned previously that I've always had like a pretty good relationship with the teachers and everything. And my daughter's the one that has the more severe behaviors. And I kind of almost felt like it was a betrayal somehow. Like when I thought about bringing in, like back then it was advocate, you know, and a liaison, because I thought it would like mess up our relationship. Can having a liaison at school meetings make things awkward for the parent and teacher relationship?
Sometimes it can be a little awkward, but that doesn't mean we don't push through. So part of what we say to families is right out in the beginning, let your school know that you're brainstorming with Insource. So that's the verb I like, is brainstorming. We're discussing, we're having some intentional conversation. So we're going to front load you with information. And I said, if you're more comfortable, just explain you've read in Article 7 that you can ask for an independent education evaluation. Okay. But if you would like, you're welcome to include me or our staff when they're working with on this email to the principal about your concerns. But, you know, since we are collaborative, that's also part of why our staff will also tell the school that we're attending, because we like to really put our attendance in the right frame. We have a scope of helping with special education questions and concerns. Okay, we are not a gotcha organization. We are an organization to support the understanding of parents for the special education process and to help assist in any way that we can in that general case conference with technical assistance. And we cover, you know, the whole state. So many times we might have been in a conference facing some of these same concerns and challenges, and someone, parent, school, or us, have come up with a creative idea. So let's share those basic ideas.
I love this. I'm just listening to this and it's so beautiful listening to, like, I wish there was one in every school, just educating school and every parent in a liaison.
Well, and I appreciate that. And that's really our hope. That is really our hope. So part of what we say is a family can bring anyone with knowledge to their case conference. So know that that is your right. So there are certain rights, there are certain roles and responsibilities, just like we have a scope. But in general, since we are not there to be adversarial, doesn't mean we don't have hard conversations, because sometimes parents are like, well, I thought you would go in and do X, Y, and Z. So we want to try to set that stage ahead of time, which is why we don't just pop into meetings. We want to properly prepare and discuss our scope and our role. But in general, the thought is we're there to help brainstorm. We're here to help facilitate some discussion. We're here to maybe ensure that a parent, or help ensure that a parent understands some terms when maybe they won't ask. So as we help them even help formulate some questions, or, you know, Mr. Jones, on our conversation, when I wrote down points, it says here that you had concerns about X, Y, and Z. Do you want to share some of those concerns? So we want to try to ensure that there's good intentional conversations. We're not there to put words in a family's mouth. If they have no concern about something, and we've already said, okay, my concern is change of placement. That's big. And we talk about least restricted environment. But if parent says, I really want my child in X, Y, and Z, we discuss the concerns, like let's say in light of diploma or whatever it is, and that's their decision, and school are in agreement, then our job is to enlighten and ensure that everyone understands that discussion, right? To not walk away from the table with that parent not understanding it because they didn't know what the terms were. Okay, we want them to make an informed choice, but that child is not our child. Okay, so though we might personally do something different from our child, our job is to help them learn to advocate and to understand the system, and to say, okay, so, you know, right now your child's going to go on half days, or, you know, homebound, then there needs to be a case conference every XYZ. And this might be, you know, another additional component is, you know, what's our transition plan to come back? So we are there generating some conversation that's intentional and meaningful.
Yeah, those are powerful. Does Insource have parent training to help understand the laws? If so, how often are they? Where do they find them? And are they specifically timed, or can you come and go as you need to, you know, as you have the time?
Well, another excellent question. So on our website at insource.org, we hope that everyone will visit us. We do have trainings under general trainings, and families can go in there, community stakeholders, school. We have participants from all areas of life, and they can go through a special ed 101. They can go through collaborating positive relationships with school and parent at any time they want. Additionally, we are now getting back out into doing some training. A lot of ours is still virtual, but if you go to our website and you look at our calendar, you will actually see the webinars, because we have archived webinars, we have current webinars. We've had Dr. Nancy Holsapple, the special education director for the state. She has come and done webinars. Actually, we're doing office hours with the Department of Education. We'll do another one in this month and another one in May on different topics. So they can go to our calendar, they can see what's going on, and they can also archive our trainings, go to our archived webinars and trainings at any time they want. And as we are now stepping back into some in-person trainings, then they can, of course, register for those. They can see all the printable resources that we have.
Great printable.
Yes.
Great printables.
We have what's called a worksheet of concerns. That's really helpful, just to try to help walk through. We have that parent's guide to the IEP, which we send out a lot, and that we have that helps families understand each area, kind of a discussion, what should maybe be discussed. So we have lots of printable resources as far as that. And if you go to our website, you will just see a variety of different videos, trainings, archived, and links to national organizations. And, you know, we want to make sure that families can get a copy of Article 7 or Navigating the Course. They can download that, and they understand what the dispute process is, what those steps are. So many times a parent will call us and, well, I said I didn't like the IEP, but did you take the next step? You must take the next step if you're contesting. We want families to understand that, and that's what those trainings do. We additionally do have a volunteer program, and they can go through those trainings. And I think you had a question later on about that. But in general, that's a really good way to help others. And families get to make a decision about what they want to do, and they work with their local team leader in that area. Just understanding what the process is. We have a code of ethics for our volunteers. Our volunteers get trained and know what our philosophy is in order to be a volunteer, because we feel our volunteers are wonderful. They are very helpful, but we want to ensure that they understand what our mission and our vision is, and what our scope is. So yes, please visit our website at insource.org. We're also on Facebook. We're also on Instagram and Twitter, and we'll be on TicTok very soon. So we're excited about that, because we're getting ready to do a wonderful fundraising campaign. So that's going to be fun. But on our website, you can find a variety of information, and you can do it, you know, go through those modules at your own convenience. But we are always happy to talk with anyone and to come out and do some trainings. So that's one of the things we are getting back into training. But virtual training has been helpful because people could come from all over. So we have been doing a lot of virtual trainings so we can do Special Ed 101.
Yep.
We do a discipline training for you. So just let us know, and we will be happy to do that. But we hope that individuals will check out our website. You will see your local special education liaison. Excuse me, you'll see our administrative team, and you'll see me. You'll have my contact information, but the local special education liaison typically gives that ongoing support because they are there in that community.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
Well, here's that question. Okay. I saw there were 2 tiers of training offered, one for personal use and one for volunteers. Can you explain what a volunteer would do and what are the differences in those trainings?
Yes. So the trainings themselves are pretty much the same. The difference is with a volunteer, you have to pass a little quiz to be able to move on and to become a volunteer. So we want to make sure that that volunteer understands. Okay. And so you have a quiz, and then you go through all that training, but then you also have a 3rd day training where there's more ongoing connection with your local special education liaison. So that might be in person, that could be video. Recently, it's been video, but it's pretty much almost all day long training after you finish all the modules to really understand our vision, our mission, and how an Insource volunteer can be helpful. And we want our volunteers to be integral parts. We also include them in one of our conferences each year. So that's really exciting because we require that they do some ongoing training. If they want to attend a case conference, then they have a badge and they go through a whole process of that so that we know that they've signed their code of ethics when they're a volunteer for us. And if they're going to attend case conferences, then we want them to be comfortable. They're going to be working with their local special education liaison, but maybe that volunteer just answers a question. Okay, they're still going to sign that code of ethics. They're still going to go through that 3rd day training and all of that information so that we are assured that they are able to give that first level of assistance. And then if that situation gets more complicated, then they very well, that volunteer would work with that local special education liaison, or maybe even send that family there. So our volunteers are wonderful part of our organization, but they can make a decision. Maybe they just want to talk to families, as they call it. Maybe they want to attend transition fairs and help our special education liaisons that way. Or maybe they even want to attend a case conference. But just because you are a volunteer doesn't mean you have interest in those things. We really do want families or community stakeholders to volunteer, but to be comfortable with what they're volunteering and know that they have ongoing support from the special education liaisons and team leaders, because we have a team leader module to assist them. And we additionally want to make sure they understand our mission, our vision. They sign our code of ethics so that they know how Insource functions. So it's two-pronged. We want them to know and be comfortable with the level of support they're giving, but we also need to know that they understand Article 7 and they understand our mission and vision and how we work with families and schools.
Is there a certain number of hours they have to do, or is it just based on what their schedule allows? Volunteers.
Well, and I would encourage anyone who's interested to contact Beth Ernsberger. She is listed right on our site as an administrative staff member, and she would walk them through that. But basically there's a series of modules and then the quizzes at the end, and then they do the 3rd day training. And so I'm not sure exactly how long all of that takes, but it covers special education 101. Then they do their 3rd day and then they sign their code of ethics and that type of thing. So if anyone's interested, they can contact Beth and find out more about it. Also on our website, they can read more about our volunteer program. But we greatly appreciate our volunteers and they assist families every day, and we are excited about that. So that is a little different than if you're wanting just individual information. I started out as a volunteer. Before I became a paid staff for Insource for now 17 years. So many times that is exactly how our staff come. They come as a volunteer. They get to know the families. They get to know working with the schools, and then we have a position open up and they step into it. A lot of our staff actually were volunteers. So it's a wonderful way. And then we want to support that volunteer and family because we greatly appreciate them and the expertise and relationships that they bring. So I
love that you shared that that information about volunteers, because when I was thinking, whoa, volunteering for Insource and being, going into case conferences, that was really intimidating. But the different things just talking to parents or going to the transit, there's so much more to volunteer for than just that big one of doing that.
You are absolutely right. And because there are many families or volunteers that maybe they're not comfortable with that. Or maybe they're not in the season of life where that's going to work, right? Especially in central Indiana. Now this is probably pre-COVID, but it's coming back. There were so many activities that we could attend that there was no way that we could attend them all. Transition fairs and a variety of things. So that is one really very meaningful area that our volunteers assist with, is being able to go to those, putting out our information, and they will walk alongside, so to speak, with their local person, making coordination for those efforts. And many times the volunteers are the people, what they want to say is, you know what, I'm not real comfortable with talking with lots of people, but I can find the venue for you to do a training. I can be at the table to sign people in. I can do X, Y, and Z. So we really try to do our best to go by what the family's interested in, because that support of finding a venue for me for a training, signing people in, is just as important as doing something else. And it's helping that family be connected to the process and to Insource, and that's invaluable.
Yeah.
So that's also one of the reasons, you know, our volunteers are invited to our a yearly event to try to, of course, provide training for them. They're also the team leaders, and the teams were broken up into teams, provide a ongoing training for volunteers at different periods of time. So we want to keep them connected so that they understand the whole process, the changes that are coming about in the state. But yes, if you're interested in volunteering, reach out to Beth. Her information is on the website. If they reach out to me, I'll talk with them, but send them to Beth, because it is vitally important that we do have volunteers. And once again, it can be in so many different capacities, and we are appreciative for all of the assistants, and we want to help support them as staff for Insource.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. So we've covered a lot of information today. Is there anything that we haven't covered, or anything else you'd like to share about Insource?
I think in general, just like to encourage folks to visit our website, our social media, reach out to their special education liaison. Their phone number and their email is there. If they have questions, please reach out. Please attend our webinars, go through our trainings, and understand that you are an integral part of the process under IDEA. So under the national law, it's one of the 6 principles in IDEA. And to know that your voice matters, and to know that you are part of that case conference team as much as anyone around the table. You know your child better than anyone else. And because there's a proposal of FAPE, that free and appropriate public education, does not mean you have to agree with it. No, it doesn't mean you don't, agree with it. So one of the questions, well, what if there's no problem? Well, that's wonderful if there's no problem. I encourage families to go through Article 7 trainings, okay, to read the resources, download Navigating the Course, so that they know, because sometimes maybe there's just a discussion and not a disagreement, and you want to know how that process works.
Yeah.
Okay, you want to know about goals and those things. So our resources can help you with that, and our links to other organizations like Indiana IEP Resource Center can help you with that. The Department of Education, Special Education has obviously wonderful resources. So part of what we want families to know is the fact that they do have rights, roles, and responsibilities, and that they are to be an integral part of that case conference team for their child to access their free and appropriate public education. And we want them to know that we are there to walk alongside them, and we are happy to help them in any way that we can in stepping toward understanding that process.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here, Lesa. Go to their website, insource.org, follow them on social media, follow us too. Like, share, subscribe. If you've used a liaison advocate before, leave us a comment. Thank you so much, Lesa. This was very, very valuable.
Well, thank you for having me, and I look forward to collaborating, and hopefully folks will get that information so that they will know how to understand that special education process.
Yes. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
Yes.
Bye.